Good evening. My name is Vince. I'm the main organizer of machine learning in healthcare, currently based both in Berlin and Budapest. And I welcome you to today's broadcast. And today's topic is AI in pathology, which is a very interesting topic since many might believe that pathologists spend most of their days actually with dead people. But the reality is that they spend a lot of their time looking at slides sitting in front of the microscope. And these slides, of course, can be digitalized, and these images can be analyzed with artificial intelligence. And we have a great panel today that will talk about this topic, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot, and I hope we will learn a lot together. This is again a collaboration with Meetup.ai, which is run by my ingenious co-host, Nicholas Borsato. And without further ado, Nicholas, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Vince. As Vince said, we are very, very happy to be collaborating with Machine Learning Healthcare again, to be co-hosting this panel on AI and pathology. Many of you already know who I am. My name is Nicholas Borsato. I am the organizer of Meetup AI, and since the pandemic struck, we have been doing everything digitally, which kind of allows us now to reach a much wider audience. So my first ask for everybody watching us right now is to start sending us questions and points in the comments about where you're watching this from. It's always a big pleasure to see people outside of our main markets of Berlin. So if you're coming from abroad, or if this is your first Meetup AI or your first machine learning healthcare event, please let us know in the chat. The chat is also going to be used for Q&A for our panel. So I will be watching the chat and looking for your questions, and I'll be bringing them during the panel for our panelists. So there will be no end time for the Q&A. So if you have a question, you can just ask that directly. So without further ado as well on my side, because nobody comes to hear me speak, I would like to bring our panelists to stage. Please, a digital round of applause to our panelists. So I am joined today by Maschenka Balkenhol, MD, PhD in pathology resident and researcher at Radebong MC. Felix Faber, founder and CEO of MindPeak, and Chen Sagiv, CEO of Deep Pathology, previously co-founded Sagiv Tech. Thank you very much, all of you, for spending your time today with us and to sharing your insight and expertise. And let's hit the ground running as we like to do it here and start off with, a lot of people think that if there's a medical field that AI should be used already in large scale is pathology because of the power of computer vision. So I'm going to be sending to Maschenka the first question and then open for all panelists, which is, what are the main roadblocks today for the implementation of AI in pathology? Maschenka?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Nicholas, for the invitation to be part of this panel, and actually a great question to start with. Unfortunately, there are not just one, it's not one roadblock. There are a few. First of all, digitization. So we talk about digital pathology, but for many labs, it's not straightforward to have a scanner to look at their slides digital. So that's the first hurdle, of course. But when it comes to making algorithms, for instance, the part of validation, internal validation, external validation, but more important, prospective validation. Because you can have a great AI tool that can assist the pathologist, but you have to research, is it really useful for the pathologist? How does it add value? Does it value, it's just an isolated task, and does it fit in the workflow? So that's why prospective studies are very important, to see if it can be integrated in the workflow. And of course, the part of ethics and privacy are very important topics in itself, not only for pathology, but for radiology. I think that's common in the field of medical imaging. Mm-hmm. So I think those are a few points, hurdles to take in the next year.
So I flipped the question out to the two entrepreneurs in the panel as well. So let's start with Chen. Chen, what would be, let's say, your favorite roadblock or your least favorite roadblock?
I think that, well, first of all, I'm also very happy to be here and to be joined with Maschenka and Felix. I think that the future is going to be AI in healthcare in general, and I think that now is the time for pathology. And as Maschenka said, the enabler for all this good stuff is that information will become digital, and apparently we are not there yet. It's going to be processed. It's investment of money and resources and change of workflow, and it takes time, but I think that we are getting there. I think more from my point of view, and this is also something that we think about a lot, is how to gain the trust of the pathologists to trust the AI algorithms, and because at some point, if you have some automated process, you will rely on it. You will use it, and eventually you want to know that you can actually trust it. And I think that this is something that as a community, as individual companies, as researchers, this is something that we have to advance to make sure that besides regulation, we also have visualizations with explainability, so that pathologists can really trust what they get from such platforms.
Very, very good point. And Felix, what about you?
Yeah, so thanks also for the invitation. So I see a couple of more issues, to be honest. And so one huge issue is I think that the images that we are getting, when they come from different laboratories, that they look very different. Yeah, and Andrew Ng had just a talk about this where he said that they trained an AI at Stanford, and when they go to a radiology, in that case it was radiology, to a radiology lab down the road, then suddenly it doesn't work anymore. And I see that as one of the main issues why AI hasn't found a broad distribution yet, apart, of course, from the lack of digitalization. So we have to cope with extremely large variance that comes from the process of preparing the slide. The slide gets prepared by cutting the tissue, and the tissue can be cut in different thicknesses. Then it gets stained, and the staining can be done by different chemicals, different antibody or other chemical providers, and they look different. Then the temperature in the lab plays a role. Then the machine that stains plays a role. Then the scanner plays a role that really scans the tissue. So there are many, many variables, and in the end, an image comes out that looks quite different from an image in the lab. And the human brain can deal with it because of the context knowledge and sometimes just training on one lab, and the AI has problems with that. And I would say the second issue when you want to really empower the pathologists is that pathologists are really good at what they do, and they are really fast at what they do. So they look at slides all day long, like 100 or 100 cases, maybe 200, 300 slides. And each slide, if you imagine how large that is on computers in an image, each slide is around a gigabyte of image size. So they process a couple of 100 gigabytes of images each day, 6 hours per day. Day out and day in and day out. So their brain is really, really, really good at it. And to get an AI to be as good as the human is difficult. So I think it's actually more difficult in many instances than creating autonomous cars.
Oh, that's actually a pretty nice benchmark. I was going to say it's a very high bar to jump for the AI, probably, right? Like not only pathologists are very specialized, they are also very used to the small differences that can trick an AI. And I think one question that jumps to the mind and is that we have two people here, both Chen and Felix, who don't necessarily come from the medical field in the beginning, and they fell in love with this challenge. And I would like to start a bit with Chen to tell us how did you end up there? You had experience dealing with computer vision in multiple industries, and you looked at this little bit and you thought like, yeah, let me have a crack at it.
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't mention that in our previous talk, but when I was 20, I was really thinking, what should I study? And I was adapting between going to medical school or going to study mathematics and physics. And then I said, okay, I will do less harm studying mathematics and physics, and I also am afraid of blood. So I have this urge in me to do something which is in the medical domain, but I think what's really so after many years in doing projects in several domains, from agriculture to to things on the cell phone to aerial photos, I think that the opportunity to start working with the pathologist and to get to understand how critical, how crucial are decisions made by pathologists, because you, as someone who goes to the doctor when you have a flu or something, I mean, the role of the pathologist is usually behind the scenes, and even with people who need the pathology advice, it's not something that you are very aware of that. And I think that understanding how important is the work of pathology and really how technology can benefit pathologists in making these decisions and really bringing good to healthcare. I think this is something that actually motivates myself and also our team in our company, and it brings us a good feeling to bring value to this field.
Sorry, to mute and unmute myself. Felix, I think the question for you is even more pertinent, given that you found success before in games. So you not only you went into pathology, but you were doing pretty well at something else, and then you said like, nah, let's go into this field. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, but you still need to know that my main background is still in the AI space, coming from an two AI universities, Osnabrück and Freiburg. So I did a 10-year excursion to games, and then came back to AI, basically. That games excursion was fantastic. We had an online games company. We merged it with a Swedish company. The Swedish company went to the Swedish Stock Exchange, did a buy and build strategy, so bought more companies. It was so I learned how to run a business, and the role was similar because I did operations. I didn't do the tech part, actually. But then when in 2016, 17, everybody saw that suddenly the neural networks that we had learned back then became useful. And back then, our professor, he was one of the early DeepMind employees, and he already had the idea of processing object recognition, doing object recognition just from pure large images, which was at that time unthinkable. So it was great to see how that technology suddenly scaled with the amount of computation and amount of data that we have. And we said, well, let's, together with Tobias, my co-founder, who I studied with together, let's find an area where we can have a purpose, and where that technology really helps. And the pathology lab, a lot comes together. It is a laboratory with a high throughput. There's a lot of pressure. There's a decreasing number of pathologists in many geographies. For example, in the UK, there's a backlog, so unprocessed slides that are lying around, and because there's not enough pathologists' power to analyze them. And compared to the radiology space, in pathology, you have some pathologists that do more of the same tasks each day. A radiologist often has many different tasks during the day. So if you try to sell them an AI, they say, okay, you save me like 3% of the day. But if you sell a breast pathologist or somebody who does a prostate diagnosis an AI, you maybe save already 10-15% of the day. So that's from a business perspective also an attractive field. And that's how everything came together, basically.
That's a very good point. I also want to just give a quick heads up for everybody in the audience to follow Nico's example and to drop in your questions in the comments. Nico, I'll be taking your question in a second, also because it's very similar to another one that I have. The speakers and I have spoke once before, and I did make a point that, in my opinion, the most important person in the room is Maschenka as the pathologists of the future. And I wanted to ask Maschenka, basically, do you feel that and actually let's bring up also Nico's question, because we're going to be touching it a little bit as well. Do you feel first that it is hard to convince pathologists to use AI? And then B, do you think maybe there is still a jump between what people believe AI can do in pathology and what AI can really do in pathology?
Yeah, very good question. Starting with the last part of your question, I think at first, when AI began to emerge in radiology and also started in pathology, some people didn't believe it. But now, since sometimes it's a bit of a hype, people think it can do everything. So I think it should be somewhere in between. I don't think AI can solve everything or replace pathologists. So in that way, it's also what Chen said. We have to educate pathologists, lab technicians about what AI can do, but also its limitations. Yeah, and the first part of your question was about trusting AI, I think, right? Yeah, I think that also relates.
What are the challenges of convincing pathologists to use AI? But I think trust is a big part of it.
Yeah, it's just seeing if it works well, of course. And now you have a lot of papers and research on so-called the black box and turning it into a glass box, so that pathologists, other people can understand a bit more what the algorithms do. Although I myself don't believe that I need to know every detail of a specific algorithm, just as I don't know every detail about how to stain a slide for ER or PR. The lab technician does the staining, and I see that the staining was performed correct, but I don't know the exact details how to do it in the lab. And I think it's a bit the same with the algorithms. But if it's very important to get indeed trust, to open the black box a bit, but not in too much detail, because otherwise we're not computer experts, mathematicians or so. So I think education, presentation, just also doing it, trying it out in practice. But how will it help you? It can benefit yourself, but also the patient, of course. If you score ER and it's more accurate with an algorithm, it's also beneficial for the patient. So I think, to overcome this, you have to work on multiple, parts. This problem.
I think that's something that we see a lot in AI and healthcare. It is a chicken and the egg, but to the extreme. It's like there's 15 different chickens, and some come from eggs and some don't come from eggs. It's impossible to know, and we're all blind, so you don't know where to start. But I really, really like the point that Laurel already threw there in the comments. And she says, as a former pathologist, I would probably argue they are more concerned that poor tech will actually increase their already heavy workload. And I can say for sure that this is something that I heard in other disciplines of doctors just believing that the tech is not meant to reduce their workloads. So I'm going to be throwing those to the two entrepreneurs on our side of the panel, and I'm going to ask, how do you deal with that kind of question, Chen and Felix? Like, how important is for the solution to fit into the workload? Like, we're trying to revolutionize the industry, but we're also trying to make their lives better. So who would like to take this question first?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important to, it's incredibly important to fit it very seamless into the workflow. The integration part is so significant; it cannot be undervalued, because the speed in the lab is just so high, and also the processes are so optimized towards speed. And every click and every millisecond or every second that you lose will be felt by the user, and this is the pathologist, and so it will lead to objection. So that I think speed and integration is maybe 40% of it or 50% of it. Yeah.
I completely agree with Felix that, and I was really smiling when I saw this remark, because I think that medical doctors don't like to be disturbed. They really say, okay, you want to help us? First, don't disturb us and don't disturb our usual workflow. And I think that's really to have it, as Felix said, seamlessly and very, I think, natural in the workflow, in the way that things are being done. And in order to do that, I think you need to communicate. You need to, so as Maschenka said, maybe pathologists need to be educated about AI, but the AI experts also have to educate themselves about the pathology processes, what's really important, how you do things, what's more urgent, less urgent, etc. And also, in order to embrace this technology, I think that for me, it makes sense that this is also part of our vision, that pathologists actually be a part of the AI creation. And this is completely different when you are taking something that is developed outside of your domain and you try it out, and then you say, okay, this is like a tool. I got some explanation, I can use it, I can try it out, and I can see how it works. But when the pathologists are actually becoming part of bringing AI to the domain, then not only that they are not afraid of it because they are part of the process, but they will also be committed, and I think that they will also understand how AI can benefit them. So I think that when you look at it as an effort of a community, bringing together pathologists and AI experts, this is the way to go, and this is the way to gain acceptance and trust. So I think that don't disturb the doctors, try to listen to them and try to understand what really helps them. I think this is the main takeout from me from the last few years.
I think that listen to your users is one of the most obvious, valuable feedback and advice that you can give anybody in a startup. Absolutely. And prepare yourself, because I'm going to be bringing the puck back to you. But just a question for Maschenka first. We have a comment from Fabi Lu, which we hear often. And we hear often from not only from doctors, but we hear, I think, even more often from people outside the medical field. And that is that doctors might be afraid of being replaced. And I want to make this point because I really, really like the sentence from my co-host, which I steal from, as a friend of mine says, better well stolen than poorly made, that the first doctor to be replaced will be the doctor that is not there. So the doctor that is missing, the doctor that just isn't there yet. But I wanted to ask you, let's call you a pathologist of the future. Do you feel that people in your profession are a bit afraid of being replaced by AI?
Well, sometimes you hear that indeed, but I think it also relates about what we talked about previously, education, talk with each other. What can AI do for you? Indeed, they are a bit afraid, but speaking for myself, I'm not afraid that I will lose my job. Or as you said in your introduction, we have an increasing workload. There are less and less pathologists, and AI will really, I think, be a sort of clinical decision support in a lot of fields in pathology. But I don't think it will replace the pathologist yet. But indeed, what you said, very important, in the places that you don't have pathologists, AI enables you to bring in a sort of pathologist, an AI pathologist. So I'm not afraid, and I think if AI becomes more general in pathology, just like it is in radiology, because there you see the same. Radiologists are not replaced by AI algorithms. So I think it's a good example that we don't need to be afraid.
I think there was a lot of scaremongering in radiology back in the day, like tell medical students to not study radiology anymore because in 5 years it's dead, and that was 10 years ago. So just very important to also rein into the hype. And as many of you know, I carry the sin and the burden that I am actually an economist. So the next question is very much to my part of that audience, which is, do we need to change the way that we sell products inside of healthcare to be able to actually provide the impact that we want? And we're lucky here that we have Felix, who with his tool is going for a platform approach. And we have Chen with her tool, which is a bit more a do-it-yourself tool, which is actually very, very rare in the field. So I'm going to get it to Chen first and say, Why did you do it this way? And why do you think that this can kind of improve the way that developers and pathologists work together? Then Felix, it will be your turn to tell us why did you choose a platform and how do you feel that this can improve the lives of pathologists? Chen, back to you.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that when we entered the field of pathology, and I have to refer to one of the remarks here that AI people just do things in domains that they don't understand, and I think this is an excellent remark. And sometimes the AI people can be accused of being arrogant, and I think that really understanding the field is so super crucial. Otherwise, you're doing nonsense, and you have really to learn and to be ready to understand that you don't know everything. But this is why we had the opportunity to be a part of the Roche Digital Health Accelerator about 3 years ago. And there we had an opportunity to talk to several pathologists from pharma research, CROs, from diagnostics, and we really listened and tried to understand what kind of problems and challenges are out there. And what we came to understand that there are two approaches. One is to have a solution which is built, closed, black box, and which was verified, of course, regulated, very important, but then it can be immediately brought to a clinical use. On the other hand, there are like hundreds of pathology questions which are being asked in research, diagnostics, and also in pharma research. And these questions, you don't have like an AI team ready to go for each and every of these questions. So we actually built also a platform, but this is a do-it-yourself platform that actually is tuned to three main problems: cell detection, objects classification, and region segmentation. And the main idea is that the pathologist brings their expertise by providing positive and negative examples, and this is how the algorithms which are built in are tuned to solve this specific problem. And the reason that we wanted to do that is because our vision is to bring the AI capability to the hands of every pathologist, because the way that we envision the future is that AI would be a tool, one of the tools that pathologists will be using on a day-to-day basis. And I'm very, very afraid that Maschenka is not afraid that she will be replaced, because I completely agree. She will not be replaced. She will only have more sophisticated tools to assist her in what she's doing.
Very, very well said, Chen. Felix, what about you? Tell us a bit about how you're trying to make the life of the pathologist easier.
Yeah, so our vision here is really clear. So we believe in products that work out of the box, so that are really plug and play, that you have only the minimal parameters that you can tune, or the best would be 0 parameters, that can still be checked, so it's still a human in control and checking the result of it, but where there's basically the human interaction with the system needs to be very low. And we see that from other laboratory equipment that is designed that way, that there's a button and you press it, you put blood in and you get a result out. And that's how we envision digital pathology solutions, AI pathology solutions. And of course, that's difficult because of these variances that we have in the lab. But that's, yeah, I mean, a bit of advertising, but it's also our strength that we can deal with that. And then with that, we could get an CE IVD cleared product out with that.
It's a very, very nice point. Fabi, sorry, can we bring the comment from Pabilu into the screen as well? Because that's a very, very nice one. And also, I'll do a bit of advertising ourselves, and I'll ask our friends from Machine Learning Healthcare to put a link in the comments for our past event, from tweeting bugs to catching them. Should doctors become data scientists? And that's a very, very good event that we discuss exactly how much technology a doctor should know, or how much can we expect doctors to know before they start using AI solutions. I super recommend them for students, like people that are still figuring out what they're going to do in the medical field. And we have a great panelist, a great group of panels there. Thank you, Fabi, for making that point. And then we come to a question that is also very, very important, and that is, why are we doing this? So when we think about, let's say, a short answer, what can AI actually offer a pathologist, let's say, in the next 5 years? Let's not put this in a very, very long future. We have already products in the market in pathology. Chen and Felix show this and are living representation of this. And we have Maschenka, which is somebody who is looking at seeing the implementation of AI inside of her work. What can we expect AI to do for pathologists soon? I would, whoever wants to go first, raise their hands to take that bullet. Otherwise, I will be giving that. Oh, Chen is it is. Chen, take it.
Yeah. Okay. So looking, I think 5 years from now, I think that solutions such as the ones that Felix is developing are going to be, I think, very, very important, because it will actually, I think, will be of great benefit to labs to accelerate their work and to really ease the burden on the routine day-to-day activities of pathologists, and I think that this will actually be super beneficial for the pathologists, for the patients, and will advance things. I think that another thing that I see is drug outcome prediction. I think that it's going to be super important in the coming 5 years, and it's, I think, gaining a lot of momentum nowadays to be able to use retrospective studies and to see the reaction and the results, and to really provide the right treatment to that specific person. I think that this, I'm fascinated by this, and I think that this is not very far-fetched. I think that we are also working in this field, and this is super exciting, because I really believe that this will make personalized healthcare a big thing really soon. And the other thing is that I think that medical doctors will have a broader perspective on how to analyze data, so that they will have like some kind of screen like pilots have, where the information will be visualized and obtained and quantitative. And I think that still the pathologists will be able to integrate and make sense of all this information. And I think that this is also something that is being developed, and I think that in 5 years we will see that.
All right, Felix, you want to take it now? Because I'm going to add a bit to the question before I send it to Maschenka. She always gets the special questions. Felix?
All right, sure. Yeah. Well, I think in 5 years' time, pathologists will have pretty good tools that relieve them from a couple, like I would say 50% of the tedious tasks. And they can use that time to focus on the difficult cases that lie around on their table for a long time, that they haven't looked on, that they think, I should look at this one more closely, that they have a little bit more breathing time in between the cases to take, to really think about them. And I think, I see a quite positive world for the clinical routine diagnostics. And in the research side, I agree with Chen.
Very, very good point. Maschenka, on top of that question, I also want to ask you to give a bit of a human perspective or a doctor's perspective on this, and tell us, like, is there one task already that if AI could take off your hands tomorrow, you would be very grateful for? Like, think about the most boring, annoying task that you need to take. But first, you can tell like how you feel about this whole thing. I
hope it's on our list.
Well, actually, none of the pathology tasks is boring, but if you have to do it over and over again, then indeed it takes a lot of time, and you don't have any time left for the difficult cases on which you have to take much more time, or consult your colleagues, ask for extra staining or molecular tests, but coming to the first question, I actually completely agree with Chen and Felix that in the next 5 years, I think AI will help pathologists, like me, a pathologist of the future, so to say, in tasks like, well, let's give an example, count mitosis for breast cancer or any other type of cancer, or if you have an oncological resection specimen, for instance, colorectal cancer, breast cancer, head and neck cancer, you have a lot of lymph nodes that you have to examine if there is cancer present. Can take up to 40, 50 lymph nodes. That takes a lot of time, and you have to be very concentrated because it's a very important prognostic sign for the patient and the further treatment follow-up. So I think tasks like mitosis counting, finding lymph node metastasis, Helicobacter pylori, those kinds of tasks, I think in the next 5 years, there are multiple solutions for that. Many companies focus also on those type of tasks instead of the more difficult tasks like if you have a slide, predict outcome of the patients. Without any other annotations or context, so really end-to-end algorithms. So I think the so-called straightforward tasks that pathologists are doing now, also Gleason grading for prostate cancer or finding the prostate cancer, I think we have already great AI algorithms that can do that, but the next step is really bringing them into the clinic. So again, the validation, interoperability, overcoming those hurdles. But I think that will be reasonable for the next 5 years. Yeah,
that's really nice. We have a question there from Nico Paris, which we get often when it comes to medical data. One would hope that pathology would be better because of how many digitalized slides are already there, but given what I heard, probably isn't. But his question is, sometimes it's hard to have, especially with medical data, big amounts of publicly available data sets. Do you think that this is going to change? So I'm going to take Nico's question, and I'm going to throw on top of that for Chen and Felix, for you to give us a bit of how was your experience collecting the data necessary to create, let's say, the MVPs of your solutions. Let's start with Chen.
Yeah, so first of all, I think this is an excellent question, and only recently there is a very large data set of NHS, the TCGA, which is very famous, and it was blocked, and you couldn't take images from there anymore. And I think that it's and I think that also, I think Maschenka, you probably are aware of the Big Picture project, which is really an effort to create the largest. It's a EU-funded project, really a huge one, very, very important one. I think that it is headed by Radboud University, and to create the largest pathology data set available to really address this issue. And I think that this is super important, and I think that the reason that it's so hard to get public data sets is because it is worth a lot of money. And it is an asset. So data is the new oil. You don't see oil for free in the streets. And I think that this is also becoming like an asset that is a merchandise that you are selling and buying, and it's an asset of hospitals. And there are so many issues with that, because what is the part of the patient and the privacy and etc. So I think this is really a tough task. And I'm very happy to see projects like the Big Picture, which is really amazing. From our point of view, we are, so actually we have a bypass for this problem, because our platform is actually, you can create new algorithms based on relatively very small amounts of data. So we're not talking about thousands of slides, we're talking about a very limited amount of slides, because our platform, our studio, is able to tackle 3 specific kind of problems, which are very general, but they are specific computer vision problems. And in order to generate a new solution, you actually need to fine-tune an existing one. So you don't need a lot of data. And our experience is that pathologists can actually use it within their lab. They can rely on their own resources within their own lab. So for us, up until now, we didn't need a lot of data. Of course, when we go to validation, we need to do it very, very, let's say, profoundly and do it with enough data to make sure that everything works well. But I think on one hand, having such effort as the big picture to really make data available for everybody who wants to contribute, and on the other hand, platforms like ourselves, like the ones we have that rely on small amounts of data.
So you were muted, but maybe you said that I should say something now.
Yes, don't know what
so
happened.
I think you need to also differentiate between pure slides and then annotation on the slides, because so it gets a bit more difficult here, because getting slides and maybe a broad range of slides from different institutions with different scanners, different stainers, that would be, of course, a huge win. And I hope that these large EU grants now that they do this. And Maschenka, I also hope that you do a good job in that. Yeah, so that will definitely help. I also loved your challenge that you did, the Chameleon challenge, because that sparked a lot of startups. That was, I think, fantastic. And then when it comes to the annotation side, the annotations need to fit to your AI model. And in our case, we have created a very specific AI model that fits to the annotations, where the annotations can be done in a quick manner, because time in annotating is so critical, because it can take hours per slide or can take minutes per slide, and pathologists' time is very expensive in labeling these images. So that means that it's not so easy. If you would have a large data set annotated, it might not fit to your algorithms, or all the algorithms would be of similar kind, and that could even hinder innovation. So yeah, I don't have a real answer to that, so what to do about it, but right now we are just doing our own annotations, because then we know how correct they are, and we know how that they fit to our model. Yeah.
And in your case, Felix, you're doing your own annotations, but the slides themselves, are they coming from a partner hospital?
They're coming from partner hospitals. Yes.
Okay, that makes...
Actually, for us, it's the smaller part of the problem, because the archives are large, and we have partners that develop things with us, like Charité, like other universities or large labs, and so getting the raw data is okay, but the real cost is actually in the annotations.
By the way, I'm going to do a quick shout out to Radboud University Hospital, because we have Maschenka this time, and the last event we had Kiki van Leuven, and not only great speakers, but they're also doing very, very good work. So check out everything that is coming from Radboud. I was going to bring Sammy's point. So Sammy has a point. If when dealing with this kind of sensitive data, would you be able to use de-identification solution? So I think that's actually a question that I also have. Like, when we're dealing with medical images of other types, the ability to identify patients is seen as very crucial. Do you feel that this sensitivity of the data is also a problem when dealing with pathology data? And do you feel that we can kind of approach this with de-identification solutions? I think that whoever wants to take that question first is not an easy one. So just raise your hand or say something.
Yeah, so I will try to deal with this challenge. I think that I think that when you look at the pathology image, I don't expect that even a trained pathologist will not say, this belongs to someone. But then of course you need to really to make sure that all personal data is not there. And the other thing, which is I think even more crucial, is that sometimes the pathology data is part of the entire picture. And for example, when you look at IBD, at infectious bowel diseases, like such as Crohn, so the pathology data is only one part of a very, very complex, let's say, information. And then you will need a lot more information about the patient to make, let's say, a reasonable decision. And then I think there starts the problem, because then you have more specific information about the person, and it's going to be like, will you not be able to track back who this person is, and what will be his insurance status, and etc. So I think that this is really a very big problem, not only in the context of the pathology image itself, but also in the accompanying information, which is sometimes very crucial to making such decisions. And I think that this is something that we still have to deal with, because for images by themselves, I think it's easier, and it's also something which is now quite, let's say, mandatory, and everybody's doing that to identify images. But when you look at it on a larger context of patient information, I think that this is something still to be thought of and handled.
I would add one question to it, and I will ask Felix and Maschenka to also mention. But wouldn't that extra information be part of the reason why a pathologist might want to work with a digital AI solution? The ability to aggregate more information than that is in a slide quickly, so that they can quickly look, okay, but does this person has any other thing that could kind of explain this, rather than having to double check? So is this problem with sensitivity also a question of makes it harder to create, let's say, a solution that would truly save time for the pathologist, or am I completely out of bounds? So Felix?
Well, no, yes and no. So yes, if you want to include more patient information and do like prognosis and these kind of things, then it gets more difficult. But you can definitely save a lot of time if you just work on a single image, on a single slide, and you solve a task on there, and you anonymize the slide in the training process, before the training process, and once you analyze it and something is sent to, let's say, an AI server that's in some kind of private cloud, there's no personal information sent there. So no personal information either leaves the hospital, because it's only tissue, only cells, where you cannot judge which person it is. Or even this AI runs on premise inside of the hospital IT, and thus is also compliant with GDPR rules. So yeah, I would say we have a quite sophisticated law regulations here in Europe to deal with that, and I think this is enough. So if we comply with GDPR, we are fine. And yeah.
All right, Maschenka, your point?
Yeah, I agree with both Chen and Felix. To add to that, so the research group I'm in is in the hospital. So our complete IT environment is in the hospital. So all the patient data, it remains in our own hospital, but also we get patient material from other hospitals. So also our own patients for research and patients from other hospital patient material, we anonymize everything. So the slides, indeed, even the label of the slides, we get rid of it, because with that number you could look up which patient it is, and also the clinical annotation. So if it's also simple things, female, male, age, sort of metadata. So I think it's a very important point, and so GDPR is very important, but still I don't think it's completely solved yet. So think like who owns the image? Is it from the patient? Is it from us? So the tissue belongs to the patient, and the image is a reflection of the tissue. So I think yeah, it's also part of the next 5 years, things we have to think about, and to yeah, to get more insight in it. I think, yeah.
We are coming to the, thank you very much, Maschenka. We're coming to the final part of the panel. This is also the last opportunity for the audience to send us our question before I head up with my final ones. One from my side is still that I would like to ask Felix, is that he has a CE certified product. And I would like to ask him, how was the experience on getting a product through regulation? Do you feel that this was a big hindrance for your company? How was your experience?
Well, I would say for a startup, getting CE IVD clearance is the opposite of fun. So everything from the regulation is made to do things what a startup doesn't do normally. You have to understand what the regulators want to reach, and that is patient safety. So once you understand this and you want to minimize the risk of your product, then it's actually easier to deal with it. The problem is that many of the regulations have been written for machines, so for devices that are really in the real world, like or that even come into your body, and you have like a list of vendors that bring in some screws and some metal or whatnot, and now you need to check these lists, and are the screws are all fine, and do they fit, and does the whole thing is it waterproof and stuff, and the software development works just different. And now these same rules are being applied to the software development and maybe even to AI development. Yeah, so then it's very difficult to read these norms and really distill out what they want. Yeah, and try not to do too much unnecessary things. But when you always think about let's minimize the risk for the patient, that kind of brings you on the right track, and then you are able to leave some things away, and maybe in other parts do things that are not in the norm directly described, because you think then you can minimize risk for patients. Yeah.
No, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you can avoid doing it, then avoid it. Yeah, and I really hope. Yeah, I mean, society, like here, especially in Europe, it's always you look at risk a lot, and you see, okay, that kind of we have the regulations, and somebody got still killed because the AI did this and this, or the device did this and this. So we need to tighten the regulation. But we need to think about that. On the other hand, all that technology that's not being applied, the opportunity lives that are lost because of not applying technology, this is not quantified and it's not visible. I think one needs to find the balance there, and I hope that we all find this balance in the future.
Thank you very much, Felix. I'll be taking a question from Laurel on how was your experience, both you, Felix, and Chen, forming partnerships with hospitals to obtain data. Like Felix, you already mentioned that you do have partner hospitals that provide you the slides, and then you decided to do the annotation yourself, probably because it would make it more sense in terms of development. But how was to get those partnerships? And then Chen, do you have also partnerships with hospital? How was that experience for you? Felix first.
Yeah, so it was a very good experience. So I must say that pathologists and pathology labs, when we started to approach them, they were very open, and I have very rarely experienced fear or I experienced some skepticism, but only of the quality of the product, not so much about hey, these guys are going to replace me. That's a ridiculous thought at the moment. So they were really open and interested. And I think more what Maschenka said is they overestimated at some point what AIs can do nowadays, because there are a lot of papers coming out that say, hey, we solved this, we solved that, but it's always in a lab environment or in a research environment and not in a real life environment often. But so that was not so hard, and yeah, I felt welcomed actually from the pathologist community. They actually saw it as someone who might solve some of their issues. Yeah.
Chen, how was your experience?
Yeah, so we collaborate with several hospitals, and in some crazy way, I think that COVID made our lives a bit easier, in the sense that nowadays, I mean, just doing things digitally and working from afar and doing Zoom meetings, and so I was very conscious that when COVID started, like 1.5 years ago, that things will slow down dramatically, but actually it was quite the opposite, because it was somehow people started working from afar. It was easier to reach out, and we collaborate with the hospitals from Beverly Hills all the way to the East Coast, Europe, and of course in Israel, and even Eastern than Israel. But so I think that hospitals, I think, are very, very cautious about data and about privacy, and I think that it's really international. Maybe in some lands it's a bit stricter, but this is an issue that is being emphasized with every hospital, and I think that once this is resolved, then I think there is a lot of openness, and I think that what I feel is that people want to be involved. They want to try AI on their own problems. So it's not enough to see, yeah, it's working on this problem and that problem. No, I want it to work on my problem. And I think that giving them these kind of tools and opportunity really, I think I also have a very good experience. So I think that there's, yes, I think there's a really eagerness to try to see what this AI is doing. Yeah,
I think that's a very high compliment. I think every pathologist should be proud of hearing that their profession is embracing technology in this way. And that brings us actually to my final question for the panel today. And that question goes first to Maschenka, but I would allow any of the other speakers to also comment. And the question is, Maschenka, as the pathologist of the future, what is that going to be like? What is the pathologist of the future going to be like, in your opinion?
Well, we talked already about the next 5 years, so I think you mean even further.
Even further, deeper.
Well, I think we touched on the main topic. So I think in the next 5 years we have the algorithms for quantification of staining, counting mitosis, lymph node metastasis, and I hope in the years after we get more integration of other clinical information. So you get AI systems that would also integrate radiology images in the pathology, also the clinical data, because if you review pathology slides, you also look at the clinical data. If your slides are from a child from 4 years or an 80-year-old gentleman, it's really a difference, of course. So I hope we can integrate that more, and yeah, also for the patient, in the end, reduce inter-observer variability, so come with more standardized diagnosis. And as Chen also mentioned, look more into prognosis. So we now look at slides in a certain way, but we also know there is some subvisual information in it that we as humans, we cannot grasp it. But we know from already studies with AI algorithms that there is more information. So perhaps we could also, like in 10, 20 years, whatever, have AI algorithms that can take a slide as an input, an H&E image, and say, okay, you have a chance of 80% that you get a recurrence based on subvisual patterns that we as humans cannot grasp. So I hope it will be in the future, although I think those kinds of solutions are not fit for the near future, not in the next 5 years.
Very, very nice. If anybody else wants to comment on Maschenka's point, or should I close the panel?
Yeah, just a quick remark from my side. I think that the pathologist of the future, I think that will be able to address, I think, many subspecialties that nowadays it's very difficult because it's very deep, and subspecialties are really I think you really need to get into it. So I think that pathologists will be able to handle much more information in a much better way. So this huge amount of information will be presented in such a way that you will not drown in this information, but will actually extract meaningful, I think, insights from it.
Very, very good. So I think I'll be closing the panel now then, or Felix wants to say a final word.
Yeah, I mean, one final thing that might have not been mentioned, and I agree with all that has been said, is that also there's a huge portion of our population that has no access to pathology diagnosis at all. And there are means out there to get digitalizations cheaper, like with smartphones being used as magnification scanners. And with the help of AI, I think that in a couple of years also there's a much better treatment for also developing countries. And that's also our aim, to enable that.
Very, very strong point, especially coming as I come from Brazil as well. I can definitely feel on my skin your point. So I would say, before I close formally the panel, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can keep seeing the content from machine learning in healthcare. I do this so that Vince doesn't have to do. This is what true friends are about. And I would say interact with the speakers. Reach out for them in LinkedIn. They are very good people, I can say for sure. And if you want to know more about their solutions, if you want to know more about their work, just reach out directly. It is my pleasure to be moderating this discussion. I always learn a lot from our speakers, and I thank you all so much for sharing your insights with us. And then to our audience, thank you for staying with us this long. There is always more content coming up. There's also already 5 other panels that we did with machine learning healthcare. So especially if you're a student and you want to know more about the different sides of technology in this field, keep following us and keep checking. And Vince, thank you as always for the invitation. The stage is again yours. Have a good night.
Thank you to everybody. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you didn't leave me anything to say. So thanks to all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.